I like literally dropped out of college, and then I was clinically depressed for 5 years.
Oh my God. Don't watch the YouTube video.
No. Now they're definitely going to watch it.
All right, what's up? Welcome back to the Best Foot Forward podcast. It's me, Vic from Cestlavic, and I've got here with me
Ann Duskus of Studio Duskus, and we are both makers and sneaker artists from San Francisco.
Yeah, so welcome back to this episode. What do we want to talk about?
So today, I want to get a little vulnerable.
Okay.
And I think this is a topic that you and I both have been putting off for a while because it's, on paper, it seems a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic is mental health.
Okay.
And I want to use this as an opportunity for, at least for me, first and foremost, to share a little bit about my struggle with mental health, as a person, as a professional, and how it, for better or for worse, got me to where I am today. Mm-hmm. So I think it's for the better, I think. I think I had to go through, some personal struggles to get to where I am today. And maybe just shed some light on, it doesn't have to be a scary thing. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And, and if you have something to share, from your personal experience, I obviously would love to hear and for us to share it with our listeners.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because we talk about everything in the studio, like anything that pops into our minds, we're just like, hey, girl, listen. But mental health is something that comes in every now and then, but we don't really dive into such serious conversations. You want me to start?
Sure, if you want to.
Okay. So I have never, and I want to say this because this is just how I reflect on it. Growing up, mental health was not a thing because in an Asian family, in my Asian family, it's not recognized as a thing.
Let me just get on record and say that in any Asian family, it is not a thing.
Yeah,
it's not a thing. Like it's a thing to make it not a thing.
Yes, exactly. There. It's like, don't be ridiculous, get over your feels, whatever it is, like that is insignificant. Other things are more important. School, success, like all these other things come, even eating, just eat, Mm-hmm. It's like it comes before mental health. And, I think a lot of it is in my, in the older generations, again, like I said in another episode, my parents and grandparents are really just focused more on survival than they really are on other things. And I think we've gotten to a point where food on the table is to be expected. And so we have more room to start to understand how we feel. And I don't think, I've always kind of been the kind where if I'm upset about something, the next 24 hours I spend on getting over it. I don't dwell on failures or whatever, or I keep it to myself. The next morning I wake up, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. Nothing fazed me, and whatever. And
so it sounds like that's how you dealt with mental challenges. Mm-hmm. You deal with it on your own.
Yeah. And it's always been like that. And again,
has that something to do with the fact that you're the oldest child in your family too?
Probably. And okay. I was like the golden child because I grew up with my grandparents. So everybody comes to our house and I have to be on my best behavior. I have to be a role model. I'm not the oldest out of all my cousins, but I'm up there. So it's like, oh, Vicky did this. Like Vicky has good grades. She like that type of behavior is expected of me. And so growing up, it's always been like that. And I think right before I moved out to California, I was actually, so I graduated and I was applying for medical school. And I also kept that a secret because nobody knew. Like my parents didn't know. They were just like, oh yeah, she's going back to school. You know, like why isn't she doing her PhD?
That's so smart to not reveal that though, because think about how much more pressure it will be if you told
That's
your
the
parents.
thinking. But then other people, like I have friends who are not Asian, they'll be like, why wouldn't you tell your parents? Because they don't understand, like, I don't want them to have to worry. You understand because you said that,
completely.
right?
Yeah.
So you know what the mentality is. But like for 2 years, they're like, oh, they're wondering what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost worse to be hiding something because you're always making excuses. You're dodging questions about, and you know, every family gathering is like, oh, Vicky, what are you doing with your life? Vicky, what are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
And so I would always be like, oh, nothing. Don't worry. I'm figuring things out. And, like, they always want to dig deeper and they always want to be nosy. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I don't think I told a lot of people. So I don't think my family really knows that I was applying for medical school. And then, you know, I didn't get in. And I won't get too much into that. But so for the next couple of years, I was just working and just making ends meet, trying to find my way, trying to figure things out. Like, oh, I don't want to do research anymore.
Wait, hold the phone. I'm sorry to stop you right there. When you didn't get into medical school, did you tell anybody, or you kept that to yourself?
I kept that to myself too.
Okay, so even to this day, does your parents know?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think it's openly been. They might have assumed because they saw me studying all the time, and you know, like I did a lot of volunteering and all of that stuff. So they maybe had a hunch.
Yeah.
But again, this is like to talk about my family dynamic. It's like, although I share a lot of things with my mom and dad and we're really close, I don't necessarily go into the feelings and like, you know, all of the difficult to discuss topics.
Why do you think that is? Is it because you want to protect yourself or you want to protect your parents?
I think it's that a little bit of both, really, because I didn't want to be a disappointment, you know, and like that weighs in really heavy for me, even to this day. It's like, oh yeah, your daughter grew up and went and became an artist, you know, that's like, I mean, since day one, when I started doing Instagram, that's something that I do briefly mention is like, this is frowned upon. Nobody does this. Nobody wants to brag about their own child being an artist in an Asian family. It's not something that I think my parents have trouble being proud of it without some kind of justification.
Wait, to this day?
To this day, because they don't understand it. It's really hard for them to digest because their measure of success is how much money do you make? What title do you have? Like, what kind of authority do you have? What kind of job, like, influence do you have? You know? And for me, like, I went through everything. I did university, so I have my bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree, and I did very well in school. But then to really take a 180 and do something that's, like, quote unquote, a disappointment to the family, I think was, like, really hard. And so I never tried to pursue it until I got here. Yeah. I never really went for it. But yeah, and there's more to say, but I kind of want to hear about you.
I have so many things to say, like based on what you're just describing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting now, like today. So my parents are on Instagram.
They're on Instagram?
They are on Instagram. And
do they follow you?
Yeah, they follow me, and they will look at all my stories, and they will like my photos, you know, they're great. And it's...
My mom does too now. She's always like, oh, I need to see what you're doing. But I'll talk about that later.
Yeah, but it sounds like, that's why I asked the question, like to this day, you know, after you, to everybody else in this community who have seen what you've been able to accomplish, you know, like with your art, with your following count, with, you know, working for celebrity clients, working with brands, like to everybody else besides your parents, like, it's a big deal. You know, and so that's why I was just curious, like, okay, they didn't feel good about it before, but how do they feel about it today now that you've been able to prove to them, here are my success stories?
It's not enough.
Right. And that, but again, it's an Asian thing. It's never enough.
It's never enough.
It's never enough. That's just the thing. With my parents, it's, I mean, so they follow me on Instagram, and I think it's only in the last 5 years of my life, and I'm turning 40 this year. It's only in the last 5 years of my life where my parents, especially my dad, have finally started to say directly to me, I am proud of you. I am so proud of you.
Yeah. I feel like that's like, man, that's like a phrase that my parents have not told me to this day. And if I heard it from them, I think I would like uncontrollably cry or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
How did you feel when he says that to you, or when he
it's
first
so
said
nice.
that
And
to
then
you?
he was like, oh, send me this photo so I can show my friends. I'm like, no, you cannot show your friends. This is a top secret project. Like, Dad, what are you doing? You know?
Oh, those darn top secret projects.
I know, you know? So, like, he totally is, like, he loves, like, showing me off, which is, like, so precious, you know? And my mom still worries, though. You know? She's like, well, you know, now that you have your own business, like, you know, like, how much money you're making, like, are you covering your bases? I'm like, don't worry about it, Mom. Like, I got it, you know?
I'm figuring it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but she knows, like, I've always been that child where, like, I cannot be controlled by my parents. And so she knows there's nothing that she can say to, like, stop me from pursuing what I'm doing. And so she's just like, all right, you know, you do you know?
Yeah.
But let me kind of, like, go back in time a little bit, because, you know, I really want to share with, you know, our listeners here sort of, like, my struggle with mental health. And and then, you know, you were just sharing with us, like, you did everything a parent or an Asian parent could have ever expected a child to. Like, you got your bachelor's degree, you got your master's degree. I went to college, but I only have one degree, and that's an associate's degree. I don't even have a bachelor's degree. And I didn't get my associate's degree until I was 28.
Yeah.
And so what happened earlier in my 20s was, like, again, you know, like, if there's another episode where we talk about privilege, and we cover a lot about, you know, how I was growing up as a child, and how spoiled I was, right? And I think, you know, growing up, I've never been, like, academically driven. You know, I just, like, I've always been, like, a creative person that just, like, never really, like, warmed up to, like, the traditional way of learning, you know? And so, and I just remember, this is actually, like, I want to tell everybody this quick story. You know, I went to a private school when I was in elementary school before we immigrated to America. Yeah. You know, I grew up in Taiwan. I was born and raised until I was, like, 8 there. And then up until that point, I went to, like, a private kindergarten. I went to a private, like, elementary school. And this is where, like, the education system there is so effed up, because they think this is actually good for the kids. Yeah. And so I remember, like, you know, so, like, grade, like, 1st through 6th, like, you spend 6 years of your life with the same students, like, everybody in your class, like, you advance to the next level together. Yeah. And so, and every quarter you get ranked based on how well you're doing in class. Yeah. What place you're at among your peers, you know? And then I'm always, like, in a class of, like, 40 people, I'm always, like, 37 or 38. You know, I'm always, like, ranked the lowest, right? Yeah. And then they openly share that with, like, the class, because they think that is a way to motivate you to do better next time, because this looks bad. Like, how could you, you know?
It's to shame you.
It's right. They shame you into thinking that it would get you to do better, right? But of course, like, it may work on 1 or 2 kids, but like for somebody like me, when you get shamed, you get you just like curl up in a ball and like you don't, you do worse. Like it actually has an opposite effect, right? So just imagine like how many kids go through that traumatic experience, which is like so ridiculous to me looking back. So, but thank God.
How many kids can't get over the fact that they think they're not good enough.
They're inferior, right?
They're inferior
exactly.
because they're not intelligent enough, or they can't do anything else in life. Like, I think in Asia, there are a lot of places where if you don't pass a certain test, you don't get anywhere.
Right.
Your chance of success is next to 0.
Right.
Because you didn't pass this intellectual test.
Right.
So you can't even assimilate into society because you're useless.
Right. Like, which is like so crazy.
Terrible way.
Right.
Yeah.
So crazy. And so, I mean, just like imagine what kind of trauma like gives like a young child, right? But I think for me, like I'm trying to think if that actually faced me. Maybe it did in one way or the other, but like I don't have a recollection of like how much that has affected me like consciously. So thank God.
Yeah. Thank God you moved to California too.
Oh my gosh.
It's a completely different way of thinking here.
Yes. So grateful for my parents for making that decision for us. And so after I finished high school, I obviously like I had plans to go to college because that's what appeases my parents. Yeah. Right. It's like, oh, you have to go to college. Yeah. We didn't immigrate for you to not go to college. Right.
Yeah.
Fine. And so, but again, I still wasn't like super like, driven like in school. And so I was like, okay, let me just go to college and get a degree. That satisfies my parents.
What did they want you to go to college for?
So, I mean, of course, they wish I can be like an engineer, computer science, and like,
doctor, lawyer, all that stuff.
I mean, I think they knew better than to expect doctors and lawyers from me, to be honest with you, because they're like, no, she doesn't seem like the type that would consider. Yeah. So they're like, okay, what are some other high-paying jobs that she can like look to get into industries, right? Right. So at the time, it was like early 2000s, so it was like all about like, computer engineering and graphic design was a really popular subject, and then so. I don't know how my mother at the time like heard about graphic design, but it was like a really like hyped like career, So I was like, okay, that's art and it's computer related, so maybe it'll be okay. Yeah. So then I chose to go into that, and fortunately for me, San Jose State at the time, which is really close to my house, the State University. They have a very good graphic design program. So I was like, okay, great, I'll go there. So I applied and I went there. And then I went through like 2 years of undergrad in like fine art because that's how you like, your path is like to get to upper division, like graphic design courses. Yeah. And then the year before I was applying, like I remember like 400 people applied. They only took 60. And I was like, well, I have no chance. Yeah. I'm just here to get by. Yeah. Like if I don't even have the passion to like pursue graphic design, they're not going to pick me. Right. Like they're going to know, So I was like, oh crap, what do I do next? And then, like I never really thought about going into fashion design. And then so it was like my parents, that actually encouraged me to get into fashion design. We'll get into that story later, but it was just like crazy. And I was like, okay, like I'll look into fashion design. And then so I actually started going to fashion school, by their like encouragement, which is like, again, crazy. Yeah. And then, so it's a 2-year associate's degree program. And this was like, and still in my early 20s, I was like 21. And then literally the quarter before I was graduating, like I was very close to like finishing my program. Something like went down, like something crazy went down with my family back home in Taiwan. Yeah. And so I literally like dropped everything and I went to Taiwan and to spend time with my family. And then whatever happened, like I won't talk about it, because it's really private, but whatever happened back home, I was really traumatized by it. Okay. And so basically, like, I took the trip to Taiwan, came back, and instead of going back to school to finish my last quarter so I can get my degree, I like literally dropped out of college, and then I was clinically depressed for 5 years. Oh my gosh. So I was diagnosed, and I was just kind of like living like a zombie for 5 years, and to some degree, I was like sometimes even suicidal too, which is like crazy to think about it now.
That's insane.
Because I feel like I think a lot of my friends would be surprised to hear this because everyone's always like, oh my gosh, Ann, you're always so optimistic. You're always so happy, you know? But it's like, I went through a really dark period to get to where I am today. And so I think it was like, again, so that was pretty much like the middle of all my 20s.
Yeah.
And
5 years is a really long time.
5 years is a really long time.
Yeah.
Especially in your 20s. Like, I feel like the 20s are like your golden years, you know? And I know like people always say like, yeah, there are people in their 20s that are still trying to figure out their shit, you know? And I think I was like way beyond that. Like, I didn't even know like, you know, what I was doing, you know? So like, to me, looking back, you know, I often think about like, oh my God, that was such like a waste of time, you know? Like, imagine how far along I would be in life right now had I not had that gap in my 20s. But then I'm at a place right now where I'm at peace with it, you know, because had that not happened, it's very likely we wouldn't be sitting here in front of each other today.
You are right now.
Yeah. And so I went through 5 years of being like clinically depressed, and then I met my husband, my boyfriend then. And again, this is where like I'm so grateful to have somebody that came into my life and saw more in me than I was able to see in myself. And he was like, get your shit together. Yeah. You know, we're going to go see a therapist. And like, he literally will push me, take me to my therapy sessions and pick me up, you know, when I'm like a hot mess every time, you know? And so it was because of him, I was able to have a breakthrough in my therapy sessions, and I was able to like rise above my trauma. And then that's when life really began for me.
Amazing.
And so that's when I was like, okay, like I'm ready to go back to school and finish my degree. And so by the time I only like, when I dropped out, I only had a quarter to go. Yeah. And by the time like 5 years later, like curriculum has changed and now had to like take another year, you know, in order to finish and get my degree, which is fine. You know, like I was ready to do it. And so by the time I got my associate's degree, I was like 28, you know? So to a lot of people, that's kind of like a late start to your career, right? And like, and I'll share this too. Like my husband, like he also like went through a similar path as me. Like, you know, he wasn't depressed in his 20s, but you know, he was also a very creative person, and he didn't get his first degree until he was 30. Yeah. You know, so he also had a late start, but like, in my opinion, we're very successful today.
I think it's really important to, if we have younger, like a younger listener in the audience, that it might seem like the be-all end-all, you know, when you're making that decision after high school, when you're in college and university, and it feels like it's not right and you don't know where you're going. There's that point where you get lost at the crossroads. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. Right? And Anne and your husband, you're like testament to that you can be really successful, and it's actually for the better, because when you do choose to go back to school, you know exactly what you're going for. It's actually worse that you just mindlessly go into something that you're not passionate about. Yeah. You know. Can
I point out, because I really want to hear your story, but like, let me just point out like something that was really interesting. So like when I went to college for the first time, fashion school for the first time, like, again, like, yeah, it's fun, it's art, you know, art school, whatever. But like, I was still just doing the bare minimum to get by. It wasn't even like, yes, I get to go to fashion school.
You're just not a school person.
I'm not a school person.
That's not how you learn.
Right. And so like, I would get C's, you know, it just, again, I would do enough to get by.
Let me just say this though, ever since meeting you and like knowing you, like getting to know you very well, you are a very intelligent person. You are very, very intelligent. And just because you're not somebody who likes to learn in that kind of environment doesn't make you not smart, not successful. Like I can see your brain. You're like very quick, you know? It's not about, so it's like not about that. It's not about how well you do on a test, right? Or like how long you can sit in a lecture room and like absorb everything that a professor is telling you. Yeah. It's not about that.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And I think honestly, like looking back, I'm like, most people in their early 20s, right out of high school is not ready for a full-on fashion school education. Like fashion school was hard. Yeah. You know, and by the time like I went through my whole depression phase and I was ready to go back to school, on my own terms. It wasn't because like my parents expected me to. Like I wanted to.
Yeah.
Everything changed. Like I was so excited about school. I was getting straight A's. I made the honor roll, you know? So it was like I was in a good place, like to do well in school because I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And on my own terms. So I think that's really important to like point out, you know, to like, yes, like I personally know some people right now, you know, some younger people who are just very against like going to college right now.
Yeah.
And while like I can sit here and all day and be like, no, don't be like me and waste 5 years of your time in your 20s.
Yeah.
Like I am the example that like I've had to waste 5 years in my 20s in order to rise above and have what I have today. So it's like, who am I to tell them? Like, you know, I just like wish I can like help them get there faster, but they're not going to get there any faster.
Everyone has to take their own road.
Yeah.
And on the same breath, it's like, I had 2 full degrees before I figured out that this is what I want to do for the next little while, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel so much, I've never felt like I've been in a better place right now. But do I regret going through that? Like that was, so I did co-op. That was 5 years of an undergrad and then another 2 years at least of my master's. That's 7 years.
Damn.
Of school where I'm not using a lot of those skills that I went to school for and paid an education for you, like paid for education. So it's not about that. It's about you finding your way and like trying to like speak to people that are in the place where you want to go and get to know, because that's one thing I didn't really do very well is like I just went in for it.
Yeah.
Like if I thought an opportunity was something in my head, I would just be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to spend the next, couple years doing that.
Yeah. So Vicky, can we talk a little bit about you? Like I would love to know if there was ever a period in your time where you had to deal with some difficulties internally that you struggle with.
Yeah.
And how did you overcome that?
Good question. And I'm like dodgy right now because I can't even look at the camera. It's such a sensitive topic because I think it's ongoing. I don't know since when this started. Maybe it was when like I decided that I didn't want to pursue a career in like something that was my educational background, that I started having really low self-esteem and really low confidence in myself and just everything that I'm unsure about. And this whole social media journey is like so tough for me because it's like a way for me to prove myself to me, but then I also feel like to my family for some reason, and that weighs really heavy on me because there are a lot of expectations. Like I want to get to a point where it's like, you want to receive support from people around you, and to be honest, I don't get a lot of support. And I think when you get to a point where you're successful, you no longer need that support.
Right.
And it's so important, especially when, it's like artists, like I post on Instagram and a lot of times like I'm not somebody who's like, can you like and share my stuff? Like it's hard for me to open my mouth to ask that. And there's a little expectation that's like, oh, people closest to me are just naturally going to do it. But a lot of them don't really care. And then there's that part of me that's like, why don't they care? Or like, it feels a little bit lonely, I think, in this whole path because nobody understands, nobody knows. Like, I don't have a lot of people around me that are in the creative space. Everybody is like, they've got a really technical job that's like 9 to 5, and their lives have taken a course that's like they're very successful and more like a regular, like get married, like have a good job, have a house, and like all of that. And I'm in the stage in life where I'm 30 or past 30 actually, and I don't have my ish together, right?
By whose standards?
By somebody else's standards. That feels like it's now mine, that I've adopted and said like, you cannot consider yourself successful because you haven't met those expectations. And so it's like, you know, while I'm pursuing something completely different that's in the art realm, I'm still holding myself to the standards of somebody who is in the technical field, or like, you know, the Asian expectations. And that's like so hard on me. And I think like nobody really knows this except like my partner, for example, who like he's helped me through a lot. And oh my God, this is terrible. Ann, don't do it. Cannot cry. I'm always like, oh man, if I talk about this, I'm gonna like start crying.
Thank you for sharing
But
so openly.
yeah, I think it's like all the things that I go through that I can only like share with myself or with him, and my family won't know about it. And I'm going to keep that probably to myself until I get to a space where I'm like really happy. So I'm constantly working on being okay with what I'm doing, being proud of like little successes. And, you know, maybe it's not that I'm like making hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, but at the end of the day, like I'm really happy with what I'm doing. And like, yeah, that's crazy. Oh my God. Don't watch the YouTube video.
Now they're definitely gonna watch it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that so candidly. I know it's like very hard to talk about, and I know like I personally had to like was pushing you to kind of like, you know, open up about this. So I really appreciate you sharing. And I think, you know, part of the reason why you and I get along really well is because we understand each other like culturally, and I can see, you know, based on like what you've just shared, you know, kind of my assessment of why your approach is your approach, you know, is because there is this, what weighs really heavy on us, you know, as a child of, you know, Chinese descent. There's this like unspoken like seeking of approval from your parents, from, you know, people you respect. Mostly from our parents, you know? And so like it hurts me to see that your parents and, you know, and their approval has such like a great impact on you to where it's hard to hold back the tears when you talk about stuff like that, because and again, like I've said in the beginning, you know, of this recording, that you are very successful in so many people's eyes. Unfortunately, the ones that carries the most weight are our parents. And whether or not they deem that you're successful.
Right.
And so I think, and again, like I'm much older than you, so like I feel like I was like you for a lot of my life. But I also, like, I always say, like, oh, you're a much better daughter than me, Vicky, because, like, I don't give a shit, like, you know, about what my parents think, because I've always been, like, you know, like a dark horse, you know? And so, but then, like, it's that's what makes you you. And I love that about you, because, again, you know, like, there is a part of your culture that you honor so much better than I do. And there's so much beauty in that. And I love that. And so, but I really, you know, hearing your story, like, I really hope that you'll find a way to have a better balance, you know, in putting yourself in a position where, you know, your success, or how most of us view you as a very successful artist and businesswoman, I'm not saying outweigh what your parents think about you, but at least, you know, let that have a bigger role and have a bigger weight in how you see yourself, because you deserve that.
Thank you. And I just want to say, like, a lot of this is internal, and, you know, like, my parents are very supportive. I think that they just don't understand, because our jobs are very different.
Yeah.
And, like, a thing that will be very difficult to convey is, like, people are like, oh, you want you want to do social media. It means that you love the limelight. You know, you love putting yourself out there, and you chose that career. But I think something that they don't understand is I don't want to be on social media to have my face up there. Like, I'm not trying to be a cover girl. I'm trying to, like, my entrepreneurship is more just like trying to figure out a way to do something that I love and still be able to, you know, be financially stable from it. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that social media creates a very good opportunity for me to do that. And I think a lot of them are like, even now when I go home, my family would be like, oh, like Vicky's gonna vlog this because she's an influencer, you know, or like, you should do this because you're an influencer. Like, and I always get videos sent to me like, oh, you should do this because that's your job. And every time it really upsets me because it shows that they don't understand my approach and what I'm actually trying to achieve in my business. Mm-hmm. And so it really sucks to say this, but I have to stop telling them. I have to stop sharing what I do with them. Yeah. And even, you know, some challenges and things. That's why I said, like, it feels very lonely because, you know, people are just like, oh, yeah, like, you've got followers. Like, that's what you want. Or, like, you're working with all these big brands. Like, you're so successful. Like, it makes me feel out of reach to them. And so I no longer share anything with them. And I think it's just important to know that, like, it is very hard to do. Like, I want to do YouTube, and I've told you, like, a lot too. The first time I filmed my YouTube intro that was like 20 seconds took me hours, like 7 to 9 hours. And even now, like, I will do things that take me weeks to do. And I always get asked this question. Get asked this question, like, oh, like, what are you doing? What have you achieved? You know, and it's like they want immediate results, but a lot of times that doesn't come, right? It's like we're trying to strategize and we're trying to build our businesses in the long run, and we're trying to look ahead. But a lot of times people don't understand that, which is why I'm like grateful that I have you, because it's like the first time where, you know, we have very similar backgrounds. We also have like very similar ideas of what we think is good business wise. And you understand the pains of social media. You understand the pressures that you have to post and constantly be, you know, uploading and constantly be performing and achieving and putting out things that are representative of you that have to be perfect, you know? Yeah. And it's actually really hard, but I think something that keeps me motivated, and this is like not me being big-headed, but people reaching out and saying like, hey, I suffer through the same thing. Like, I'm trying to go into like graphic design or game design, and, you know, I don't know how to do it, or like I don't feel like I'm good enough to do it, or like, should I? Thank you. Ann's grabbing me Kleenex because I can't stop myself. Yeah, like they just don't feel like they should, and they don't get the support from their family as well. Yeah. And so I want to push through because I kind of want to show myself that it is possible. Like, it is possible to do what you love. It is possible to take a path less traveled and still be successful with it.
Totally. Yeah. Can I just say, I mean, obviously I feel like an asshole, right? Because I'm like, everything that we've like sort of achieved together so far, you know, as studio mates, we've been studio mates for about like 8 months now. Crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
And so for Vicky and I have always we've had similar approaches because, you know, we understand each other. Yeah. But, you know, like if somebody were to look at us and the way we approach like our photography, you know, or the way we set things up, like they would probably be like, oh, Ann's is just like good enough. And like Vicky is like above the
that is
above
so and not true.
No, well,
it's more like why are you so extra? Why do you have to have so many things? And then Ann's like, no, I'm just gonna get it done. The way that gets it done.
No,
you know?
but it is like you sharing what you're sharing right now helps me and helps everyone understands why you do things the way you do.
Right.
Because there is trauma from your cultural background, from your parents, from your family.
Yeah.
That you have to work harder to, you always have to feel like you're doing your best, absolute best, you know, in order to have a chance for them to consider that it's good enough.
Right.
And so here I am, I'm like, I don't give a F about what my parents think. I do me all day long.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to do things the way I do. And then sometimes I give you a hard time about like, Vicky, you're so exhausting. Like, why are you doing that and that and that and that, right? And so, but like, I understand, you know, and I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner, you know, or like understand to what extent this is because of something else. So like, I first want to thank you for sharing that. I know like it's very difficult to kind of talk through, you know, your personal struggles that you've been kind of like hiding for so long. So thank you. It's an honor.
No, thank you for doing this. And I knew that I was gonna like ugly cry.
Oh
like,
no,
this is, like,
you're
totally
not
a
an ugly
thing.
crier at all, though.
Like lashes falling off.
No, you're
makeup
amazing.
melting.
No, you're amazing.
But yeah, I think thank you for saying that. But you never give me a hard time. I think it's like important to say that you keep me grounded and like ask me questions that are important to reflect on the way that I work too. And it's just something that I'm constantly battling is like, how do I find this balance of like, I don't give a crap about what other people think, including family. For my business, I have to do what is best for me.
Yeah.
Right. And learning that and continuing to grow with that is really important right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing your story too.
Of course.
So vulnerable. I didn't think that we were going to get this deep so quickly.
Yeah.
But season 2, you guys.
Yeah. We
ugly crying.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope, you know, by sharing our story, it would hopefully, you know, motivate you or encourage you to confront your own struggles and your fear.
Yeah, even if there's like one person out there that has to hear this, you are good enough, and what other people expect from you is not more important than what you think of yourself and how happy you can be doing what you love.
And remember, we are, and you are right where you're supposed to be. Yeah. So hold on to that, and
we need to choose a happier topic next time.
I know we will, but yeah. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and listening to our story. We will see you next time.
Catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Oh no. Ugly crying.
Oh my god.
I swear though, this lash is coming off.
No, you're fine.